"I'm starving for a man," said the giant black girl to the virgin rancher, her towering frame casting shadows across his dying fields as desperation cracked her voice like thunder. The townsfolk of this forsaken frontier settlement crossed dusty streets to avoid her, whispering cruel judgments about the imposing woman who dares seek work among decent folk. They've already written her story's end: permanent exile, slow starvation, forgotten death. But the gentle rancher, himself mocked as too soft for this harsh land, recognizes something familiar in her eyes: the hunger for belonging that gnaws deeper than any physical need. Neither knows. Their desperate partnership will determine who controls the winter's survival resources when harvest season arrives. With the town's corrupt leadership threatened by their unlikely alliance, and economic ruin stalking every family, one question burns: will two outcasts find salvation in each other, or will prejudice destroy their final chance at dignity? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The morning sun beat down mercilessly on Dusty Hollow as Eden Blackwood approached her seventh rejection of the week. Her 6'4" frame cast long shadows across the wooden boardwalk, causing shopkeepers to retreat behind their windows like frightened rabbits. The blacksmith wiped his hands on his leather apron and shook his head before she even spoke. His eyes held the same cold dismissal she had seen everywhere else in this dying frontier town. Eden's stomach growled with a hunger that had become her constant companion, 3 days without proper food. Her brother Thomas lay sick in their makeshift shelter on the outskirts of town, his fever worsening by the hour. The medicine he needed cost more than most folks here earned in a month. She walked past the mercantile where Clara Mae Ramsey swept her front porch with mechanical precision. The woman's weathered face showed a flicker of sympathy before hardening into practiced indifference. Clara Mae had her own reputation to protect in a town where association with the wrong people could destroy a business overnight. Mayor Rufus Creed emerged from the saloon, his belly straining against his vest buttons. His cold eyes tracked Eden's movement down the street like a predator watching prey. He had made his position clear during her first week in town. There would be no work for her kind, not while he controlled the purse strings of every major employer. The bank, the general store, the hotel. Each door had closed with the same finality. Each face had worn the same expression of disgust mixed with fear. To them, she was nothing more than an oddity, a threat to their comfortable prejudices. Eden's hands, calloused from years of farm work, clenched into fists. She had not traveled 800 miles from the East Coast to starve in another town full of small mines. Her credentials meant nothing here. Her knowledge counted for less than dirt. The sun climbed higher as she reached the edge of town, where Samuel Wilder's ranch sprawled across the brown, cracked earth. His cattle grazed on sparse grass that looked ready to turn to dust at the first strong wind. The fence posts leaned at odd angles, held upright more by habit than structural integrity. Samuel himself knelt beside a broken water pump, his thin shoulders hunched in defeat. At 28, he carried himself like a man twice his age. The other ranchers called him soft behind his back. Too gentle for the harsh realities of frontier life. Too kind for his own good. His parents had left him the ranch when they died 2 winters ago, along with debts that grew larger each month. The bank held the mortgage papers like a sword over his head. One bad harvest would finish him completely. Eden approached slowly, her boots crunching on the dry grass. Samuel looked up, startled by her shadow falling across his work. His pale blue eyes widened as he took in her imposing height and determined expression. The words came out in a rush, born from desperation and the knowledge that this might be her last chance. "I'm starving for a man." Samuel nearly dropped his wrench. His face flushed red as he scrambled to his feet, backing away from her towering presence. "I need work," Eden continued quickly, seeing his panic. "Someone willing to hire me despite what the town thinks. I can work harder than any man you'll find. I know farming, ranching, everything you need to make this land profitable again." Samuel's mouth opened and closed without sound. He had never been alone with a woman like this, especially not one who spoke with such directness. His limited experience with the opposite sex consisted mainly of awkward conversations after church services. "I don't have much money," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Neither do I," Eden replied. "Food and shelter for me and my brother. That's all I ask. Give me 2 weeks to prove what I can do." Something in her voice made Samuel pause. Beneath the desperation, he heard an intelligence that surprised him. Her posture spoke of education, of knowledge held in check by circumstance. "The town won't like it," he said, glancing toward Dusty Hollow's distant buildings. "The town doesn't like much of anything that might actually help it survive." Samuel studied her face, seeing past the intimidating height to the hunger that matched his own, not just for food, but for a chance to prove their worth in a world that had already written them off as failures. 2 weeks, he said finally, extending a trembling hand. Eden shook it with a grip that could crush bones but chose not to. For the first time in months, something that might have been hope stirred in her chest. Neither of them noticed Clara May watching from her mercantile window, her broom forgotten in her hands. Neither saw Mayor Creed's scowl as word of their agreement spread through town like wildfire. The Harvest Festival competition was only 6 weeks away. The winner would control the distribution of winter supplies, determining who lived comfortably and who scraped by on scraps. Mayor Creed had held that power for 5 years running, and he intended to keep it. Samuel led Eden toward the ranch house, unaware that their partnership had just lit a fuse that would either save Dusty Hollow or destroy them both. The first week brought whispers that followed Samuel through town like angry hornets. Shopkeepers who had once nodded politely now turned their backs when he approached. The bank manager mentioned his loan payments with new urgency in his voice. Eden worked the ranch with a precision that left Samuel speechless. She repaired fences with techniques he had never seen, her massive hands moving with surprising delicacy. When she examined his soil, she spoke of nitrogen levels and crop rotation with the confidence of someone who had studied such things formally. "Where did you learn this?" Samuel asked, watching her sort seeds with methodical care. "Here and there," Eden replied, but her eyes held secrets. Mayor Creed visited on the 4th day, his bulk filling Samuel's doorframe like a threat made flesh. His message was simple: end this arrangement or face the consequences. The bank might find reasons to call in the loan early. The town might decide his ranch posed health hazards that required intervention. Samuel's hands shook as he watched the mayor's carriage disappear down the dusty road. He had never stood up to authority in his life. His parents had raised him to keep his head down and avoid confrontation. That night, Eden found him sitting on his porch steps, staring into the darkness. "Having second thoughts?" she asked. "The whole town thinks I've lost my mind." Eden sat beside him, the wooden step creaking under her weight. For several minutes they listened to the coyotes calling across the empty plains. "I had a different life once," she said finally. "Back east. People thought I was crazy then too." Samuel waited, sensing more words behind her careful tone. "I went to school. Real school. Agricultural college." Eden's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Spent 4 years proving I belonged there. Graduated with the highest marks in my class." Samuel turned to stare at her profile in the moonlight. "You're a doctor?" "Dr. Eden Blackwood. That's what the diploma says." She laughed, but the sound held no humor. "Fat lot of good it did me. No university would hire a woman who looked like me. No research institution wanted my ideas. Every door I knocked on slammed shut before I could even speak." The weight of her revelation settled between them. Samuel had hired what he thought was a desperate woman seeking manual labor. Instead, he had partnered with one of the most educated people for 1,000 miles in any direction. "So you came here," he said. "My research partner Thomas and I. We figured the frontier might be more interested in results than appearances." Eden's jaw tightened. "We were wrong about that too." "Thomas is your research partner, not your brother?" "Both. Adopted family, chosen family. He's sick because we've been living rough for months, searching for someone willing to give us a chance." Samuel felt something shift inside his chest. For the first time in his adult life, he was the answer to someone else's prayers instead of the one doing the desperate praying. "Show me," he said. "Everything you know. Teach me." The second week transformed Samuel's understanding of farming from guesswork to science. Eden explained why certain crops depleted soil while others enriched it. She showed him how to read the land like a book, seeing nutrients and deficiencies invisible to untrained eyes. Thomas recovered enough to join them by the 10th day. Thin and scholarly, he carried notebooks filled with detailed observations from their travels across the country. Together, he and Eden had documented farming techniques from dozens of regions, creating a comprehensive guide to agricultural innovation. "We've been looking for a place to prove these methods work," Thomas explained, his voice still weak from illness. "Somewhere desperate enough to try something new." Samuel looked across his brown, struggling fields and laughed. "You found it." The sabotage started small. A broken fence here, contaminated water there. Someone had salted his best pasture, leaving a dead patch that would take months to recover. Samuel found his tools scattered and damaged, his seed stores mixed with debris that made them useless. Clara May stopped him outside the mercantile on a Thursday afternoon, her eyes darting nervously around the empty street. "They're planning something bigger," she whispered. "Creed's been meeting with the other ranchers. They think you and that woman are bringing bad luck to the whole region." "What kind of something bigger?" "The Harvest Festival competition gets announced next week. Winner controls winter supply distribution." Clara May grabbed his arm. "Creed's held that position for 5 years. Uses it to reward his friends and punish his enemies. If you challenge him, he'll destroy you." Samuel felt his old fear rising like bile in his throat. The smart thing would be to back down, send Eden and Thomas away, return to his quiet life of slow failure. Instead, he found himself thinking about Eden's steady hands as she worked, about Thomas's careful notes, about knowledge being wasted while people starved. "Let him try," Samuel said, surprising himself with the steel in his voice. That evening, Eden found him practicing a speech in front of his bathroom mirror. His reflection showed a man she barely recognized from 2 weeks ago. Straighter spine, clearer eyes. The frightened boy was giving way to someone who might actually fight for what mattered. "The competition," he said when he saw her. "We're going to enter it." Eden smiled, and for the first time since arriving in Dusty Hollow, it reached her eyes. "Then we better get to work." The transformation began at dawn on the 3rd week. Eden divided Samuel's failing ranch into precise sections, each designated for a specific crop rotation system she had perfected during her college years. Thomas mapped soil compositions with scientific accuracy, his notebooks filling with measurements and calculations that would have impressed university professors. Samuel watched Eden work with growing amazement. Her massive hands moved seeds into perfectly spaced rows while she explained the science behind companion planting. Beans would fix nitrogen for the corn. Squash would provide ground cover to retain moisture. Each plant served multiple purposes in an intricate system of mutual support. "My grandmother taught me to garden when I was 5, Eden said, sweat beading on her forehead as she worked. "But I spent 4 years learning why her methods worked, understanding the chemistry behind the wisdom." The story of her education unfolded in fragments as they labored together. A childhood spent in poverty, picking cotton until her fingers bled. A teacher who recognized her intelligence and fought to get her into a preparatory school. Years of proving herself against classmates who questioned her right to exist in their world. "They called it luck when I scored higher on examinations," Eden continued, transplanting seedlings with surgical precision. "Said I was memorizing instead of understanding, so I started explaining concepts they couldn't grasp. That made them hate me more." Samuel found his own courage growing alongside their crops. When neighbor ranchers stopped by to mock his partnership with Eden, he defended her methods with newfound confidence. When Mayor Creed sent deputies to inspect their property for violations, Samuel met them at the gate with legal documents Thomas had prepared. "You're different," Eden observed one evening as they reviewed the day's progress. "Stronger." Samuel considered this. His parents had always told him to avoid conflict, to bend rather than break. But watching Eden face constant prejudice with unshakable dignity had taught him that some things were worth fighting for. Maybe I just needed something worth protecting, he replied. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning, posted outside the mayor's office in Mayor Creed's flourishing script. The annual Harvest Festival competition would determine winter resource allocation. Each contestant would present their best crops for judging by a panel of community leaders. The winner would control food distribution, housing assignments, and heating fuel for the coming winter. Previous winners had been predictable. Established ranchers with political connections and enough money to ensure impressive displays. The competition had become more theater than genuine agricultural contest, but the power it granted was real. Samuel found Eden studying the announcement with Thomas beside her, both wearing expressions of grim determination. "We can beat them," Thomas said quietly. "Our yields are already outperforming every ranch in the county." Eden nodded, but her eyes held deeper calculations. "It's not just about the crops. This is about proving that knowledge matters more than politics." Word of their intention to enter spread through Dusty Hollow like wildfire. The general consensus was amusement mixed with anticipation of their inevitable humiliation. Some townspeople began placing informal bets on how badly they would lose. Clara May appeared at their ranch the following evening, carrying a basket of supplies and wearing an expression of nervous determination. "I want to help," she announced, setting down preserves and medical supplies. "This town's been dying for years while Creed rewards his friends and punishes anyone who questions him." She revealed information that shocked even Thomas. Previous competition winners had received mysterious deliveries of superior crops days before judging. Several contestants had suffered convenient setbacks that eliminated them from contention. The fix had been in for longer than anyone suspected. "Why now?" Eden asked. "Why risk your business to help us?" Clara May straightened her thin shoulders. "Because I watched my husband die 2 winters ago when Creed decided our family didn't deserve adequate heating fuel. Called it resource management. I called it murder." The sabotage escalated as competition day approached. Someone poisoned their water supply, killing half their vegetable crop. Fences were cut, allowing livestock to trample carefully tended rows. Tools disappeared overnight, forcing them to work with improvised implements. Each attack only strengthened Samuel's resolve. He began sleeping in the fields, armed with nothing but determination and a growing understanding of what they were truly fighting against. This wasn't just agricultural competition. This was a battle for the soul of their community. Eden taught him to document everything, every technique, every measurement, every scientific principle behind their methods. If they won, they would need to prove their success was legitimate and replicable. "Knowledge dies if it's not shared," she explained, watching him practice his presentation speech. "My grandmother's wisdom lived because she passed it down. My college education means nothing if I take it to my grave." Thomas recovered fully as their crops reached maturity, his energy returning with purpose. He created detailed charts showing soil improvement, yield comparisons, and long-term sustainability projections. Their presentation would combine practical results with scientific explanation. The night before competition, the 3 partners sat on Samuel's porch reviewing their strategy. Their crops were undeniably superior, their methods were documented and teachable, their presentation was thorough and honest. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Eden said, "we've already proven something important." Samuel looked across fields that had been transformed from brown wasteland into thriving abundance. "What's that?" "That partnership is stronger than prejudice. That knowledge is more powerful than politics." Eden's smile held quiet confidence. "And that sometimes the people everyone underestimates are exactly the ones who change everything." The morning sun painted their flourishing crops in golden light as Dusty Hollow prepared for a competition that would determine far more than winter survival. The future of their entire community hung in the balance. Competition week brought new desperation from Mayor Creed's supporters. Samuel woke to find his prize cornstalks bent and broken, their ears scattered across trampled earth. Someone had driven cattle through his carefully maintained plots during the night, leaving destruction that would have ended most contestants' chances. Eden surveyed the damage with cold fury burning in her eyes. Years of education, weeks of back-breaking labor, all threatened by cowards who struck in darkness like common thieves. "We still have the root vegetables," Thomas said, checking his notebooks against the remaining crops. The potatoes, turnips, and carrots were planted in the protected sections. Samuel felt his newfound confidence wavering as he stared at the ruin of his best display crops. The corn had been their centerpiece, proof that Eden's nitrogen-fixing techniques could transform barren soil into abundance. "They want us to give up," Eden said, kneeling to examine broken stalks. "Walk away before we embarrass them in public." Clara May arrived at noon with news that chilled them further. She had overheard conversations at the Mercantile, fragments of planning that suggested more sabotage to come. Equipment would malfunction. Transportation would be delayed. Judges would find reasons to disqualify their entry. "There's something else," Clara May said, her weathered face tight with worry. "Strange wagons have been arriving at Creed's property, covered loads coming in after dark." The pieces of a larger puzzle began forming in Thomas's analytical mind. He spent the afternoon walking through town, observing details that others missed. Unusual activity at the railroad depot, workers unloading crates marked with shipping labels from distant counties, hushed conversations that stopped when strangers approached. That evening he returned with a theory that changed everything they thought they knew about the competition. "Creed's been cheating for years," Thomas announced, spreading his observations across Samuel's kitchen table like evidence in a courtroom. "Those wagons Clara May saw, they're carrying crops from other regions." Eden looked up from her seed catalogs, immediately grasping the implications. Imported produce, things that don't grow properly in this soil. Exactly. Fruits and vegetables that would be impossible to cultivate here successfully, presented as local harvests. Thomas's voice gained intensity as he explained his deductions. "That's how he's maintained his winning streak. Superior crops that he never actually grew himself." Samuel felt the revelation hitting him like physical force. Every previous competition had been theater. Every winner had been selected in advance. The entire system was built on lies designed to maintain Creed's stranglehold on community resources. "How long has this been happening?" Samuel asked. Clara May's expression grew darker. "At least 5 years, maybe longer. I remember wondering how certain winners produced such perfect specimens when everyone else struggled with poor soil and unpredictable weather. The fraud explained everything. Why established ranchers with obvious advantages sometimes lost to unexpected candidates. Why certain winners received generous resource allocations while others got barely enough to survive winter. Why questioning the results brought swift retribution." Eden began pacing Samuel's small kitchen, her mind working through strategic possibilities. Direct confrontation would be dismissed as sour grapes from desperate losers. Accusations without proof would only invite harsher retaliation. "We need evidence," she said finally. "Documentation that proves the fraud beyond reasonable doubt." Thomas volunteered for reconnaissance that night, his scholarly appearance and quiet demeanor making him less noticeable than his partners. He returned before dawn with intelligence that confirmed their worst suspicions. Creed's property held warehouses full of imported produce. Professional displays were being constructed by workers brought in from outside the county. The entire presentation was being orchestrated like a stage production, rather than grown from the earth. "There's more," Thomas continued, his notebook filled with careful observations. "I recognized some of the crops. Varieties that require specific growing conditions we don't have here. Soil types, climate patterns, growing seasons that don't match our region." Eden felt pieces of her college education clicking into place. She could identify the geographic origins of different crops, explain why certain varieties thrived in particular conditions but failed in others. Her scientific knowledge gave her weapons that Creed could never anticipate. "We stick to our original plan," she decided. "Present our genuine results alongside complete documentation of our methods. Let the contrast speak for itself." Samuel spent the remaining days before competition practicing his presentation with new understanding of what they faced. He was no longer just a failed rancher trying to prove himself. He was exposing systematic corruption that had strangled his community for years. The weight of responsibility should have terrified him. Instead, it strengthened his resolve. His parents had died, believing their ranch was worthless. Their son was inadequate. Their legacy was failure. Now he knew the truth. The system itself had been designed to ensure their defeat. Clara May organized a network of sympathetic townspeople who began their own quiet investigation. Shopkeepers who had noticed unusual purchasing patterns, railroad workers who remembered suspicious shipments, citizens who had questioned previous competition results but lacked the courage to speak publicly. The conspiracy ran deeper than anyone had imagined. Creed hadn't just been cheating in the competition. He had been manipulating the entire local economy, creating artificial scarcity to maintain his power while genuine innovation was systematically suppressed. On the eve of competition, Eden stood in Samuel's transformed fields, watching the sunset paint their honest crops in golden light. Tomorrow would determine whether truth could triumph over entrenched corruption, whether partnership could overcome systematic prejudice. "Whatever happens," she said to Samuel and Thomas, "we've already changed things. The truth has a way of spreading once it gets started." Samuel nodded, feeling the scared boy he had been finally giving way completely to the man he was becoming. Tomorrow, Dusty Hollow would learn what real abundance looked like. The harvest festival dawned clear and hot, with the entire population of Dusty Hollow gathering in the town square for the most anticipated competition in years. Wooden tables stretched across the open space, each designated for a contestant's display. Banners fluttered in the morning breeze while children ran between the adults, their excitement infectious. Mayor Creed arrived like a conquering general, his elaborate wagon pulled by 4 matching horses. Workers unloaded crates of produce so perfect they seemed carved from wax rather than grown from earth. Massive pumpkins without blemish, corn ears of impossible uniformity, vegetables that gleamed like jewels in the morning sun. The crowd gathered around his display with predictable awe. Creed basked in their admiration, his chest swelling with pride as he gestured toward specimens that would have challenged professional botanists to replicate. His speech about agricultural excellence and traditional values drew enthusiastic applause from supporters who had benefited from his resource distribution over the years. Samuel's hands trembled as he arranged his own modest display 3 tables away. His vegetables were genuine products of Dusty Hollow soil, marked by the honest imperfections of real farming. Beside each crop, Thomas had placed detailed documentation explaining growing techniques, soil preparation, and scientific principles that made their success possible. Eden stood behind their table like a sentinel, her imposing height drawing nervous glances from passing townspeople. Her presence transformed Samuel's simple display into something that demanded attention, even from those who preferred to dismiss anything she touched. The judging panel consisted of Creed's longtime supporters, their bias evident in how they lingered admiringly over his perfect specimens while giving cursory glances to other entries. The predetermined nature of their decision seemed obvious to anyone willing to see it. Clara May moved through the crowd with careful purpose, positioning herself near conversations where fragments of truth might find fertile ground. She had spent the morning sharing what she knew with trusted friends, planting seeds of doubt about the impossibly perfect nature of Creed's annual victories. When Samuel's turn came to present, the square fell into expectant silence. Many had come simply to witness his humiliation, to see the gentle rancher fail publicly and confirm their assumptions about his weakness. Others hoped for surprises, tired of predictable outcomes that never seemed to improve their circumstances. Samuel cleared his throat and began speaking in a voice that carried farther than anyone expected. Gone was the stammering uncertainty that had defined him for years. In its place stood a man who had discovered something worth fighting for. He explained Eden's crop rotation system with growing confidence, describing how strategic planting had restored nutrients to depleted soil. Thomas stepped forward to show detailed charts proving their yields exceeded county averages while using fewer resources than traditional methods. Then Eden herself spoke, her voice carrying the authority of formal education as she detailed the scientific principles behind sustainable agriculture. She referenced soil chemistry, plant biology, and resource management with an expertise that silenced even her harshest critics. This was not the desperate woman seeking employment they remembered. This was Dr. Eden Blackwood, revealing herself fully for the first time. The crowd's murmur grew as people began comparing the two displays more carefully. Creed's produce was undeniably spectacular, but Eden's explanations made their own results seem more impressive. Anyone could buy perfect vegetables. Teaching an entire community to grow them was revolutionary. Clara May chose that moment to step forward, her weathered face set with determination that surprised those who knew her as a quiet shopkeeper. Her voice shook at first, then strengthened as she found her courage. "I have something to say about these competitions," she announced, drawing startled looks from the judging panel. "About patterns I've noticed over the years that don't make sense." She described the mysterious shipments, the impossible perfection of certain entries, the correlation between political loyalty and competition success. Other voices joined hers as townspeople began sharing their own observations, their own questions about results that had never quite added up. Thomas produced his research, documentation that proved several of Creed's prize specimens were varieties impossible to grow in their regional soil. The evidence was technical, but conclusive, supported by scientific principles that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. The mayor's face grew red as accusations mounted. He demanded silence, threatened consequences for spreading lies, reminded everyone of their dependence on his leadership. But his bluster only strengthened the growing conviction that they had been deceived for years. The turning point came when Eden made her final statement, addressing not the judges but the community itself. She spoke about partnership over politics, knowledge over manipulation, sustainable prosperity over artificial scarcity. Most importantly, she offered to teach her methods to anyone willing to learn them. "Agriculture isn't about winning competitions," she said, her voice carrying across the hushed square. "It's about feeding people, growing abundance, building communities that thrive instead of merely survive." Samuel stood beside her, no longer the frightened man who had hired her weeks ago. Their partnership had transformed them both, proving that strength could be found in unlikely places when people chose cooperation over competition. The crowd faced a choice that would define their community's future. They could maintain comfortable lies that preserved familiar power structures, or embrace uncomfortable truths that offered genuine prosperity for everyone. The judging panel looked uncertainly between Creed's perfect display and the growing crowd of citizens demanding honest evaluation. The competition had become something larger than anyone anticipated, a referendum on the kind of community Dusty Hollow wanted to be. Mayor Creed's empire of deception stood exposed in the bright afternoon sun, while Eden and Samuel's partnership offered a vision of what honest collaboration could accomplish. The judging panel found themselves facing an impossible situation. Years of predetermined outcomes had prepared them for comfortable theater, not genuine evaluation under community scrutiny. Thomas's scientific documentation lay spread across their table like evidence in a courtroom, each chart proving what everyone now suspected. Dr. Margaret Hayes, the schoolteacher who served as head judge, examined Eden's soil samples with growing amazement. Her own education allowed her to understand the technical explanations that others might dismiss. The nitrogen levels, pH balance, and nutrient density told a story of agricultural transformation that couldn't be faked. "These results are remarkable," she admitted, her voice carrying across the expectant crowd. "Not just the yields, but the sustainable methods that produced them." Creed stepped forward, his face purple with rage and desperation. He demanded the judging proceed according to tradition, reminded everyone of his years of community service, threatened economic consequences for those who questioned established order. But his threats rang hollow against the mountain of evidence Thomas had assembled. Railroad shipping records Clara May had obtained, testimony from workers who had transported the imported crops, scientific analysis that proved beyond doubt the impossibility of growing certain varieties in their local conditions. The community vote that followed was unprecedented in Dusty Hollow's history. Instead of accepting the judge's predetermined decision, citizens demanded direct democracy. Hands raised across the square in a visual representation of changing loyalties that no one could ignore or manipulate. Eden and Samuel won by a margin that surprised even their supporters. More importantly, the vote included approval for implementing their agricultural methods throughout the community. Knowledge would be shared freely rather than hoarded for personal advantage. Mayor Creed's political empire crumbled in a single afternoon, but the community chose rehabilitation over revenge. He would remain in Dusty Hollow, working to repair the damage his deception had caused. His expertise in local politics, properly channeled, could still serve the common good. Clara May emerged from the festival as an unexpected leader. Her courage in exposing the fraud earning respect that transformed her from quiet shopkeeper to community organizer. Her mercantile became headquarters for coordinating the agricultural revolution that would follow. The weeks immediately after the competition brought changes that rippled through every aspect of life in Dusty Hollow. Samuel's ranch became a teaching center where Eden conducted workshops for anyone willing to learn. Farmers arrived from neighboring counties, drawn by reports of miraculous soil restoration and unprecedented yields. Eden's transformation from desperate job seeker to respected community leader felt like justice delayed but finally delivered. Her college education found its proper purpose as she designed comprehensive farming programs that could lift the entire region from poverty to prosperity. Samuel discovered leadership capabilities he never knew he possessed. His gentle nature, once considered weakness, proved perfect for building consensus and encouraging cooperation among traditionally competitive ranchers. His partnership with Eden became the model for collaborative success. Thomas established the region's first agricultural research station, documenting techniques and innovations that could be replicated across similar environments. His scholarly approach provided scientific credibility that legitimized changes some might have dismissed as experimental fancy. Winter approached with unprecedented optimism as abundant harvests filled storage facilities throughout the community. For the first time in years, families faced the cold season without fear of starvation or inadequate heating fuel. Eden's resource management ensured equitable distribution that considered need rather than political loyalty. The ripple effects extended beyond immediate survival needs. Prosperity attracted new businesses, new residents, new opportunities that had been impossible under Creed's restrictive leadership. The railroad extended service to accommodate increased agricultural shipping. Eastern markets began recognizing Dusty Hollow as a reliable source of quality produce. Spring brought delegations from agricultural colleges seeking to study and document the transformation. Eden found herself consulting with institutions that had once refused to hire her success impossible to ignore or dismiss. She remained in Dusty Hollow by choice, committed to the community that had finally given her innovations the chance to flourish. Samuel expanded his ranch to accommodate the growing demand for education and demonstration facilities. His property became a destination for agricultural students, government officials, and farmers seeking to replicate their success. The scared young man who had once hidden from confrontation now confidently addressed audiences from across the country. The partnership between Eden and Samuel evolved beyond professional collaboration into genuine friendship built on mutual respect and shared vision. Their success proved that strength came not from individual achievement, but from recognizing and nurturing the potential in others. Clara May's mercantile thrived as the economic center of a revitalized community. Her role in exposing corruption had earned her a place in local history, but she remained focused on practical matters of commerce and community organization that kept progress moving forward. Even Mayor Creed found redemption in his reduced role as community advisor. His political skills, redirected toward legitimate service, helped navigate bureaucratic challenges and attract government support for continued development. His genuine remorse and dedicated service gradually restored some measure of respect among former adversaries. 6 months after the harvest competition, Eden stood in Samuel's transformed fields, watching the sunset paint their thriving crops in golden light. The woman who had once desperately declared her starvation for meaningful work had become the architect of regional prosperity. I was starving for a man who could see beyond the surface, she reflected, watching Samuel coordinate with visiting researchers. Turns out, I helped him become that man while he helped me become the woman I was meant to be. Their unlikely partnership had saved not just two desperate individuals, but an entire community ready for transformation. Sometimes the most powerful changes began with the simplest human needs: recognition, respect, and the chance to prove one's worth through honest effort. Dusty Hollow flourished under the leadership of those society had once dismissed, proving that wisdom and strength could emerge from the most unexpected places when given the opportunity to grow.